Hello, everybody. I'm Brad Corrigan, one of our strategic customer success managers. This is our webinar series where we spotlight leaders across investment management who are driving meaningful change with our technology. The goal here is to share real stories from Ridgeline customers on how they're saying yes to growth, staying lean, and unlocking capacity through the industry's first front-to-back platform with embedded AI. Today, I'm very excited to have Jill Fuller and Aaron McCormick from Winslow Capital Management join us for this conversation. Jill and Aaron and Winslow are one of my clients, and it's my great pleasure and honor to be able to introduce them and talk through a couple questions and get to know them a little bit more. To start, for those that don't know who Winslow is, they are a Minnesota-based growth equity investment firm founded in 1992 and are now an affiliate of Nuveen, which is TIAA's investment arm. Their focus is exclusively on growth equities, and Winslow manages more than $30 billion in assets across U.S. large cap growth, U.S. large cap ESG, and growth capital strategies for their global institutional client base. Helping lead this evolution is Jill Fuller, Managing Director and Chief Risk Officer at Winslow Capital. Alongside Jill, I'm happy to introduce Aaron McCormick, Senior Director of Portfolio Operations, who serves as Winslow's point person for portfolio operations and workflow design. Aaron is deeply focused on building automated, scalable processes while maintaining clear oversight and transparency into how those processes run, pushing to modernize away from black box legacy systems so her team can trust, verify, and continually refine how work gets done. Jill, Aaron, thank you for joining us today. We're so glad to have you with us. First, I want to start the conversation off with a few questions about the evaluation stage. Obviously, congratulations on joining us as the 26 Live customer. Digging into what that means for you a little deeper in this conversation. But first, I would like to take a step back and discuss your experience at the beginning of your Ridgeline journey. When you look back to when you were first evaluating Ridgeline, can you maybe share some of the challenges or limitations that you were facing that motivated the search for a new solution?
Sure, Brad. First off, I thank you for having Winslow Capital on this customer call. And we are happy to share our perspective. I guess in answer to your question, our previous provider really had no development that had any direct benefit to our firm anymore. And in order to grow and scale the firm, it was important for us to assess the current state and evaluate just all our options out there. And as we looked at the various providers, Ridgeline really bubbled up to the top after many years of watching the software grow.
Yeah, and even though our legacy system was fine, we would always run into limitations. So, like, we had to send files between the accounting and the trading systems every day, and that send would break, and I'd have to deal with that, or IT guy would have to deal with it. Automated reports wouldn't run or send. We'd need a new report created, and we'd have to pay them to do it, or it was really clunky to get that figured out. Like Jill said, when we looked at everything, we realized that even though it was fine, a lot of those things were a big time suck. So it was time to change.
No, that's great to hear. Thank you for sharing. Another thing that I think I'd be really interested, and maybe our viewers would be too, is how did you first come across Ridgeline?
So Josh, who's our IT director, Josh Fuller, he somehow came across Ridgeline, and I don't know the history behind that. But one day he came to me and said, "Hey, there's this new company. They're creating a front to back office, single system built in the cloud. I think you should take a look." And just having one system really got me interested right away. So then he and I went to the second year of base camp. I didn't know anybody. We hadn't really talked to anybody. We had a meeting with Dave Duffield, Dave Blair. We liked them immediately. And it was after talking to them, it was clear how passionate they were on wanting to build and create a system that wasn't yet available on the market. And they honestly valued and inquired about our input and wanted our help to develop the product.
Well, that's awesome to hear. During the evaluation process, I know that you interacted with a number of Ridgeliners. Can you share maybe a little bit about what stood out to you in those interactions and kind of the culture behind the product?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the whole development process. Every time we had a demo, there was visible progress and improvement, and it was like a whole new system every time we got a demo from it. And then we started getting a little bolder and gave some wish list ideas or talked to different people and developers and said, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And then it would make it to the roadmap, and then we'd see it on actually get developed. It was just kind of to see the excitement from the developers and then to see it put into practice was like night and day from our legacy system. And then after that, our first base camp experience, we decided to stop at the Incline Village office. And not everyone was expecting us, so it was kind of surprise to some people, but everybody was so nice and welcoming, and people were coming back from lunch together in groups. There were pictures all over the office of people doing things outside of work. Everyone just seemed to get along, and you felt the energy and the camaraderie of the whole team.
That's awesome to hear. I love that our culture can go as far as to affect some of how our customers work too. So thank you very much. I guess let's move on to the implementation story. A few questions that I'd like to have, but after completing the selection process, first and foremost, the next step in undergoing this significant of a change likely involves complex implementations, which can sometimes feel like kind of the most daunting step, as it's where, our combined vision meets reality. How did you and your team set yourself up for success at Winslow before and during implementation?
For us, it was really about having whole firm buy-in from the beginning. It wasn't any one person that was making a decision on behalf of the firm, right? Everybody had a say in our go or no-go decision to ultimately switch systems. And then once that decision was made, I made an effort to share any of the relevant bullets from the weekly release notes with our teams. They might not have been things that were addressing specific gaps that we had and knew would be addressed before we went live, but I think it just showed the pace at which Ridgeline was developing the product. And I think helped build that confidence with our team that our needs would be met as well if they can continue to meet kind of their other target delivery deadlines, if you will. And then just having a few advocates within the firm, I would say, certainly made things easier for us as well.
Definitely. And I know for our standpoint, at least, that really helped too, to know who those key advocates were internally to be able to help through the process. Luckily, I was part of that, and I had the experience to be at Go Live during the process. But I'd love if you could shed some light on, what your actual experience is basically on this project once it starts.
I mean, I feel like we need to take a step back, even into the sales process. The project really started well in advance of when you truly started to implement, right? Ridgeline did several deep dive sessions. I don't know, Aaron, like 5, 10 times they were out here on site with a whole group of people. And they really got into the weeds of what we did. They had pages of notes on Winslow Capital. And I think it's because of that we were able to uncover things earlier that played a significant role in just making sure that our project went smoothly and stayed on track.
Yeah, we also did a real deep dive into our legacy reports and processes to make sure that we were able to replicate in Ridgeline. I mean, that's baseline, right? And then also we started to think, does this make sense? Do we have to keep doing this? Why are we doing this? And so it kind of evolved to help us focus our time.
Say, as for the project itself, I had the role of project manager on our side and worked closely with my Ridgeline counterpart, Misty Wang. We had very similar personalities, so we're able to establish that great rapport from the get-go. Neither of us really afraid to share honest and open feedback with one another. On a project like this, the team that you're assigned is really the big wild card, and it really impacts kind of the ultimate outcomes. This is something that we discussed with you, Brad, at length early on. And it's you who ultimately served as our champion internally, ensuring that the team that was assigned would truly meet my high expectations. I think Misty did a fantastic job tracking project status, open items, pulling in the right resources from the different areas whenever they were needed to keep the project progressing. And really just want to give a huge shout out to our entire team that led the project to its success. Misty, Missy Morgan, Matt, Nate, Andy, Dom, Will, Alex, just to kind of name a few of them, and just so many others in the background. It truly took the entire team. My involvement was obviously a little bit higher level. So I don't know, Aaron, if you have any other more like in the weeds type things that you want to add on there.
No, I'll just also shout out Connor and Ben because I changed my mind a lot on some implementation things, and they had very graciously redid some work for me. So when it came to data load. So I appreciate everybody's help.
Definitely. We all do. I think the team was awesome on both sides, and I think everybody worked really, really well together, which was a lot of fun to see from my perspective. I think the last question on implementation I'd like to ask is, from your view, what really set the Ridgeline process apart from other implementations you've experienced or maybe heard from industry colleagues?
I'll start with that one. Everybody was so open to ideas, and we have very specific needs, and anytime something was brought up, we'd have a Zoom call with a lot of the product team. There was one call for performance. I joined, and there was probably 50 people on the call, but everybody was open to at least listening. And even if something started out as a no, we can't do that. After talking about it and hearing our reasoning for why we needed to get things posted, like management fee reimbursements, you couldn't post a negative amount. We needed that because a lot of ours will have a gross amount and then a reimbursement, and the net of that is what we actually need to post. And so once they understood the reasoning behind some of our requests, it was a real quick yes. And I was told something would be 2 months, and then it happened next week. So the attitude and the approach that everybody gave was super nice.
I'll add on a few things, Brad. Kind of first and foremost, I mean, that's something that was built over time. It was quite a long courting process. Ridgeline wasn't initially ready for us. I think it was 4-ish years, maybe from the first conversation to when we finally signed. But we tracked that development over time and just slowly began to gain comfort with not only the system, but the team behind the system. The team itself, just the level of talent that Ridgeline has brought on from all over the industry, that's not something that should be overlooked by anyone. To have somebody, as you're going through an implementation, tell you that in your legacy system, you need to run XYZ report from this menu, output it in this format. This is exactly what we need. It was such an easy process to extract the information that was needed in the format that it was needed for Ridgeline to easily ingest it. But not only with that, just they speak the same language. So as you're talking about workflows or trying to figure out how to do something in the new system, they automatically know how you're used to doing something or what you're talking about in there. So it made for a really easy conversation. And the last thing I'll add is everybody's just really open to transparent conversations. It didn't matter what team it was. There's a push and a pull everywhere along the way, but it was really a joint effort on determining what needed to be prioritized. And ultimately, Ridgeline prioritized everything that we absolutely needed to ensure that our go live stayed on track. And of course, lend to a happy customer.
Well, we're grateful for that. And we love that you guys are such a happy customer at this point, especially after going through a pretty good implementation, I'd say. Well, that's great to hear. Thank you again. The next topic I'd like to dig into a little bit would be kind of what was expected and kind of what came up that maybe was unexpected. But now that you've been live for a couple months, keeping in mind that you're still pretty early in the Ridgeline journey as far as being live on the platform, I'd appreciate if you could share a little about how Ridgeline's already making significant impacts to your business today. I guess first question, what are the biggest improvements or efficiencies that you've already started to notice?
Not having to send files back and forth. That's huge. And things don't break as much. The reporting is way more customizable, way more robust, maybe a little bit too customizable as we're going through now our first quarter end. There are a lot of reports and same reports in different versions, and I need to clean a lot of that up. But it's great to be able to just have that control over doing it. And then our ETF process workflow is way more streamlined. The things are being developed in the future too on that, but not having to manually do anything for when we get a basket in is huge. And then our reconciliation process. I think Jill's going to talk about it too, but we started, now I'm using Ridgeline's reconciliation to do the reverse parallel into the legacy system because it's way more accurate than what we're currently getting.
And add on to that, Brad, I know you guys are all about numbers. We've been able to reduce just the daily emails with morning checks and balances from 27 to 1. That was an outstanding surprise to me. We've completely eliminated the need for some of our compliance work programs. They're just no longer necessary with a unified platform, and you're not needing to reconcile or make sure that stuff was properly passed between systems. Aaron mentioned the ETF workflows. Huge shout out to Matt Coleman. He is an absolute guru. So absolutely request him to be on your team for anything implementation, Workato related. Just the solution that he delivered for ETFs was just so much more and so much better than we could have ever imagined. And also say just like transparency overall. Every single person that logs in can now see what's being traded or where things are at in the reconciliation process. And that's just not something that we ever had in our legacy systems.
That's great to share and great to hear. I love that, Ridgeline is making really significant impacts this early on in your experience with us. One more question, I think, in the same line is, how was the transition from implementation to fully live? Did this unfold as you expected? What were some surprises maybe that caught you off guard or that you were really excited to find out along the way?
I think all the work we did up front really paid off for implementation and going live. Now that we are live, like I said, reconciliation is huge. In fact, we had 3 clients or 3 custodians who wouldn't even talk to our legacy provider. So we had to manually reconcile those accounts daily. And then we were talking to the Ridgeline team, and they're like, Electra, and they're like, oh yeah, we get those. We already have it set up. I'm like, what? Now all of them are being automatically reconciled. So that has saved us a lot of time.
I would say reporting was a little bit of a surprise for me specifically. We knew there was much greater flexibility, but initially I have found that to be almost to a fault. I don't know how many times we set up reports exactly how we thought we needed them, then we'd run it and it wasn't what we wanted. Not everything was showing up, and it often ended up being user error, something with like a subtotaling parameter or something like that. But given there's so much flexibility, it's been a bit more of a learning curve, I think, for all of us than anticipated. And as Aaron mentioned, we have several iterations of different reports that are out there. That'll be one of our next steps. It's just to do a little bit of cleanup work to make sure that everybody is running, the same report or getting the output that is expected.
One of the issues that I have found in the reporting is not all of the reports and screens or I don't know, systems round the same. So Ridgeline's great because you have it like 32 decimal places extended. However, things round up, things round down, things don't round at all. They just truncate. And so that's caused penny differences. And in my operations team, I take a lot of pride that we tie to the penny for everything, period. And having those penny differences and having to figure out, okay, where is it? Is it a true break? Is it just a reporting break? It's that part of it's really frustrating, and I'm hoping that all of my emails will help solve this problem in the future for everybody.
Call out to Steve Enzi there.
Yes,
Definitely.
performance, Steve, you're my guy.
Maybe adding in a couple other surprises. The amount of time that would take to run certain market data jobs, our first couple of days, that was surprising. Or the amount of time that it took to run batch reports. There was some integration hiccups that we have, but nothing that was earth shattering. And as those things popped up, we were 100% supported by our implementation team, by product. We had direct access. We have stand-up calls. They'll hop on and be on there. And if we have something come up, we hop on. And if not, we don't have to, but we've never felt unsupported. And I'll maybe end, Brad, with my biggest surprise of all. Our traders, unsurprisingly, I think to most firms, were initially our biggest skeptics. They had a system that was working just fine for them, and as creatures of habits, didn't want to change. So ultimately, getting them excited and having them be the ones that they were the ones that said go for our go no go decision on when we were going live. That was a huge surprise to me, putting on my risk hat. I probably would have kicked the tires a couple more weeks or gone through a few more, ticks and ties of reconciliations to make sure that we were ready. And they were the ones that said, you know what, we're going to rip the Band-Aid off. So that was certainly a surprise and a very welcome one.
No, I love that anecdote, and I love that it didn't really hurt that much when we ripped that Band-Aid off finally. Well, thank you for all of those questions and answers, but I want to maybe turn the focus into looking forward, kind of with innovation and AI at the forefront of the next kind of set of questions. Our organizations, we both share a strategic emphasis on that innovation and a continuous advancement of your business and our platform. But with these mutual goals, we've had the opportunity to improve Ridgeline together, not only for Winslow, but for a lot of our existing customers and future customers alike. When thinking about the next phase of the partnership and kind of what the possibilities are that might lie ahead for Winslow, what are some of the things that you're most excited about?
I'm really looking forward to decommissioning yet another system that we have. It's a legacy provider that we use for CRM purposes. And there's just so many enhancements that are coming from a client management standpoint in Ridgeline, through whether it be dashboards or agents or just the overall transparency that's provided by the system. I think that's going to be a huge win for our sales team when we can get that transitioned over.
We also have an a legacy Access, Microsoft Access task database that tracks all of our deliverables monthly, quarterly, annually. And I would love to, our IT team would love to get us off of that. Microsoft Access isn't very fun to play with. So they'd like to get us off that.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a great thing for us to work on through workflows in the next couple of months. Another question that I'd have is, how do you plan to continue to leverage Ridgeline, both from the platform and from the community standpoint, to reach your goals?
We just went through our year-end performance reviews at Winslow, and the one thing that was on everybody, at least everybody that uses Ridgeline's review form, was a goal of streamlining with Ridgeline. That's really going to be our 2026 mantra leading into, the new technology and taking full advantage of all the efficiencies that Ridgeline provides.
I love that, and maybe we might need to steal that for a marketing campaign sometime. Streamline with Ridgeline. It's pretty great. As you're aware, Ridgeline, we would like to release updates weekly, and we operate on a versionless model. Can you share how this experience has been for your team and how it changes your perspective on technology partnerships?
First of all, it's great to not have to schedule a time and a week and a weekend to have to close down the system, transfer things over, test all the reports, make sure everything works. So that's huge, just having a versionless model. And then Raj from Kennedy, shout out to you, because he loves reading these release notes. And so he got us excited into reading them every week. Jill kind of took on that process and sent them out to the firm. So it's fun to get to see what development has happened for that week. And again, like, we reconcile with Ridgeline first and then move on, I guess. Don't have to rely on our legacy system anymore.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. And now I think the buzzword question from the industry is AI, but let's talk about it a little bit. How's your firm thinking about AI today and maybe a little bit in the future as we continue to build out our agents and our AI platform within Ridgeline?
It's a very loaded question, Brad. I don't know if we
I
have enough
know.
time to unpack all that. I guess as an asset management company, that's part of a larger enterprise. Our policies are aligned with those of the much broader, more complex organization. So you can imagine it's been challenging to see things through kind of that approval process. Yet at the same time, I mean, we recognize that the potential AI has to significantly improve and disrupt business is just it's huge. It'll lend to efficiencies, there'll be enhanced decision making, we'll be able to streamline workflows and just meet the evolving needs of our clients, in a way that's adaptable to the future market shifts. So it's a challenge we've been willing to take on. That said, we're 40, not quite 40 people. And so it's not like we're sitting here creating our own large language models or writing code, but instead we're just being very thoughtful and selective in the third-party tooling that we're leveraging. From a governance standpoint, we have a committee structure. We use a risk-based approach to really evaluate and prioritize AI solutions. And we've generally sought out ones that complement existing systems or processes that are in place and try to minimize the amount of disruption to the business. So I would think of it more as augmenting our staff and still keeping that human in the loop. Specific to Ridgeline AI, we, with the help of Alex Benke, we're able to obtain approval to leverage all of the AI functionality that's currently available in Ridgeline. And this was a monumental effort and a huge win. Thus far, we've primarily been using the assistants, I would say mostly for intelligent search, kind of quick access to help documentation, that type of thing. But over time, I do see that expanding into utilization of agents to augment and perform more repetitive manual tasks, and then just allow our employees to stay focused on more valuable business priorities.
Well, that sounds like a great strategy and a good way to kind of slowly get your feet wet until a lot of these agents that we're building are fully available and really able to be taken on completely from everyone internally. So thank you for sharing. I think we can move on to maybe one of our favorite questions that we like to ask is, moving on from this, what advice would you share with firms who are on the fence about making a similar leap to Ridgeline as you all have?
I would say talk to everybody. Talk to people that are on your legacy system, talk to Ridgeline clients, go to the conference, Basecamp, talk to people who are on completely different systems, and then talk to other companies too. So we vetted a lot, probably 4 or 5 other companies that were building cloud-based models and found they were just really stitching together different systems, which was exactly what our legacy provider was doing. And we didn't want that. So, and then we did talk to another one who was fully cloud-based and was way more expensive. Thanks, Ridgeline. So yeah, just keep talking to everybody and you'll figure out kind of where you want to go once you've discussed.
I think Erin mentioned attending Basecamp. I think it's such a great way, though, to gain excitement, momentum, build that community and getting to know other people that are using the system or that knew the pains on legacy systems. And it's a great review of just their development roadmap. There's so much work going into the product and so many new features being rolled out that it's just a lot to stay on top of. It's great to have a day of kind of a recap of this is what we've done, and then also great to see, and this is where we're going. I would also add on, don't just send one person to Basecamp to represent the entire firm. We personally found having broad representation from across your firm present at Basecamp to be such a big benefit. And, we went live just a couple of months ago. So it was great timing for us to be sending people to Basecamp right ahead of that to kind of continue with the energy and momentum off of that was built at Basecamp. But in sending that larger group, you just naturally expand the champions that you have in the firm. And that's so important.
Definitely. And I completely agree. And I also, like to mention it's a fun experience. It's a lot of networking and a lot of education, but at the same time, you get to meet Ridgeline and you get to understand, who your people at Ridgeline you're going to work with are. And I think that personal connection helps a lot as well. Well, I think it's time that we wrap up this conversation. Jill, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughtful outlook into the journey that you've had so far, from evaluation to implementation and where you're headed next with Ridgeline. It's inspiring to hear how Winslow continues to evolve while staying true to your own values. To everybody that's been tuning in, thank you so much for joining this customer conversation session. We'll be back with another conversation featuring one of our incredible customers soon. So stay tuned for details and make sure you're subscribed to our webinar series. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks all.